For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss unstable democracy. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much.
So you criticize reference to banning trains as mindless or senseless actions, and you also argue that we need to look for a reason. What do you mean? What do you think is the reason for these and other bannings and acts of vandalism?
You see, when you use terms like mindless, you are just condemning it. Now, when we analyze what we've got to do, or when we investigate, I'm not an investigative journalist, but what you've got to do is look, what is there behind the sense of horror that you have about another 20 trains being burned? In the 1990s, just after unbanning, there were people coming onto the trains in Johannesburg and just shooting people. And it was never found who they were, what they were doing, why they were doing this. And, you know, we used to use this phrase, the third force, referring to the government engineering, the apartheid regime engineering things. But I don't recall them finding out exactly who was behind it. At the end of that year, I went to the Netherlands, and there's a guy called Martin Jelsma at the Transnational Institute. And I told him about this. And he said to me, you know, in the 1980s, there had been a similar thing in Belgium. And they found out later that the fascists were behind it, fascist groups. Now, what I'm saying is, I post on social media every time there's a killing that is inexplicable, or a crumbling of a building, or a burning of a part of ESCOM, all of these things. There may be something in all of this which we don't know, because it's not at the surface. So all I'm saying is, let's not just rely on mind. Mindless means it's got no meaning. If you plan to destabilize the government, it's very meaningful to do that.
And if you are saying that there is a crisis in the ANC, how does that become a governmental and state crisis? How does it work?
You see, when Ramaphosa became president of the ANC, we know he scraped in, and his support in the ANC is ambiguous. And at this point in time, there's much more overlap in debates that are controversial, for example, regarding ESCOM and boards and CEOs and things like that. And it's the divisions in the ANC play themselves out in divisions in government. Like Gordhan, as I mentioned in the previous interview, is identified as the person who is primarily responsible for cleaning up. Now, there are a lot of people in the ANC leadership who could well end up in jail through these cleanups. And consequently, they may be outside government, no longer ministers, but they use their positions in the ANC to make rumblings against Gordhan, and ultimately the target is Ramaphosa himself. But the immediate target is the cleanup, and the cleanup is associated with Gordhan. So that's how I see it, because, you know, a lot of these people are not directly in government, but they have a way of making obstructions.
And when referring to the ESCOM crisis, you criticize the reliance on coal and other fossil fuels as the way the problem is addressed. Is this not an exaggeration to speaking of us like in the Australian route?
You see, the plan for the immediate future is to rely on coal for revival of ESCOM and to pay off debts and all of this, so that the coal-run electricity generation will succeed. I think it's about 8% of the capacity is brought by renewable energy. Now, South Africa made commitments at various international conferences to reduce its carbon emissions by X%, I can't remember, and they never reached that. They're supposed to reduce it by another percent by 2025, or maybe it's 2035, I can't remember the dates. But they are putting obstacles in the way of introducing renewable energy. And it is said that nowadays you could bring in renewable energy much more cheaply than before, and cheaper than coal. And also new jobs will be created, things like this. Now, they don't want to do this. I'm not saying it solves the problem of people losing jobs in mines. We've got to balance all those things, bearing in mind some of the mines are depleted and falling apart. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, if we continue on the route which we're on now, our climate is not as dramatically altered as that of Australia, but it is already altered significantly. This is a summer we've had now in Gauteng, and half the time we're not sure if it's going to be hot or going to be cold. And in Cape Town, you always knew 20 years ago or 30 years ago that it would be hot in this time of the year. But you can't be sure, and these winds, everything is much more extreme than before. Where it was hot, it's now extremely hot. Where it's windy, it's now gale force winds. And we are in embryo on the same road as Australia. Now, I think that the solution may in some ways be as problematic as the problem that we want to address now.
And Raymond, lastly, what is the way out of the crisis to which you refer?
I think that we need a sense of politics that is not one where we always look to the leadership and say, oh, Cyril Ramaphosa must act, Cyril Ramaphosa must get a backbone, all these sorts of things. We ourselves as citizens, some people who've got expertise, need to come together, and there are already a lot of people together about divestment from fossil fuels and things like this, but on a number of other things we need to come together. There is one of the parts of the crisis is that there's no sense that any political party can represent people's interests. They have a sense that not only the ANC, DA, EFF, they don't have confidence in them. And that means we need to think beyond party politics. Maybe new political parties need to be created, but we also need to return to our own power, whether it's church people, academics, journalists, whatever it happens to be. That is the route for reclaiming our freedom and building our freedom.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about unstable democracy.